And now we'll take the expanded mental out.
However, I think the message of the legislature is quite clear, that people ought to understand that you don't riot and then walk away snubbing your nose at the state.
Service was that of prayer, praise, and thanksgiving for their mighty, honorable duty and service to God and man.
Picketers in front of Will Rogers World Airport have become a familiar sight in the past several years, and the warnings for passengers to be wary of the safety of the skies is a familiar message. Former pilots for Continental Airlines have taken up that message now. They say drastic personnel and pay cuts made by Continental to avoid going under have created unsafe conditions. Carl Onstad, a vice president of Continental, says that isn't so, and he says the company wants the pilots to come back to work at reduced wages. Onstad was in town today to reassure city leaders about Continental's future. Afterwards, he told the media it is time for a change in the airlines industry.
We created a phenomenal flying machine, and we didn't bring the price down to where the average guy could fly. And that was the basic mistake we made in America. The creative genius of America made the flying machine, but the regulated system didn't bring its benefits right down to the average person.
Onstad said the picketing airline pilots have until November 1st to return to work for Continental. After that, he says, the airline will begin hiring other pilots who are willing to work for the new Continental Airlines at the new Continental wages. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4.
Halloween a year ago was the scariest in recent memory. It was not ghosts and goblins that made it that way. It was the real-life fear that came in the wake of the Tylenol poisonings. And Oklahoma was not exempt. Pins and razor blades were found in Halloween candy, and thousands of parents inspected each piece of candy their children brought home. It changed the face of Halloween. And now, 1 year later, police are still warning parents to watch children carefully. And just as importantly, watch the treats their children bring home.
Unfortunately, they're somewhere in the country, and unfortunately here in Oklahoma, it's been somewhere here in Oklahoma the last several years, there's been some incident of somebody contaminating a piece of candy or some kind of a trick that a child would pick up. We hope that doesn't happen. If it does happen, what we're encouraging parents to do is let us know quickly.
Police officials say tonight patrols in residential areas will be beefed up from 6 until 9. And officials are urging parents who find something suspicious in their child's candy to call the police as soon as possible. The number to call is 231-2121. Jeff Fowler, Action 4. Hospice programs in Oklahoma and around the country have become synonymous with care and comfort for the terminally ill. But to now, much of that care has been provided for privately. Starting today, the federal government is getting involved, offering money to give as many as 31,000 dying Americans an alternative to traditional hospital care. It sounds good, But some local hospice officials fear the program, while well-intentioned, will lead to fraud and abuse of the terminally ill.
I see the possibility for pseudo-hospices springing up that do not give true hospice care. I really question whether any reputable hospice could exist and give excellent care under the Medicare guidelines.
Another problem, according to Duncan, is that those who want into the federal hospice program must relinquish their traditional Medicare program. And that provision, says Duncan, will entice pseudo-hospice programs to keep people out of the hospital and could bankrupt legitimate hospice programs because there is a cap on how much the government will pay.
Under this program, patients would be encouraged to die suddenly.
So far, no Oklahoma hospice programs have applied for the federal money. But Duncan warns, with the addition of federal money, Oklahomans will need to be careful that the hospice program they choose is looking out for their best interests. Jeff Fowler, Action 4.
Oh, I listen to MTV. You know, I mean, I'm crazy about Michael Jackson. That's, I think I'm crazy about Shaka Khan. I'm crazy about, I like all music. I'm not crazy about Chopin and Mozart, but I'm mad about Bach and all the Russians. They kind of got that heavy kind of soulful music.
On these particular back down with this, it'll be held unleased or. Who start 4,900. 4,900 on the where the interested in for 4,900. Now what do you buy down on 4,900 on what do you buy down 5? What do you buy down on the where? Number 16. 48 what do you buy down on the where? 4,800 what do you buy down 5? What do you buy?
And it's just aggravating. I mean, I kind of get tired of it. And the association, our association, is trying to kind of put the halt to it and kind of let them find a better way of doing it. It's in the Denver Court of Appeals now, and I don't understand why they can go ahead and auction this off.
We're not trying to pick on anyone or anything like that. We're just trying to achieve a fair market value. And that's what we're doing to the best of our ability. It seems by offering at public auction that that would let everyone have a chance to bid, and we feel that that will be fair market value.
The investigation began recently when officials at Mabel Bassett Prison discovered that a female inmate who had been locked up for 9 months was 3 months pregnant. Corrections officials have placed a prison guard suspected of having sex with the inmate on enforced leave. Action 4 has learned that the internal probe begun with this one case has now become a full-blown investigation.
We conducted an investigation, and she identified one person that she said was the father of the child, who was an employee of ours. So we're now conducting an investigation, and what we have found is that there may be more sexual activity going on than just this one incident.
Sources say the investigation has turned up a handful of male and female guards and several prisoners who may have been involved in the scandal. Investigators say the sexual misconduct allegations so far have been limited to this one prison.
There are no state laws against taking sexual advantage of an inmate.
So even if the Corrections Department identifies the person responsible for the prisoner's pregnancy, the most the state could do would be to fire that person. Some people think it's time for the state legislature to make criminal penalties for people who abuse their state power. Scott Wallace, Action 4 at the Mabel Bassett Correctional Center.
Flood victims in 5 Oklahoma counties declared disaster areas may not receive federal loans or grants because of ineligibility. Officials in the unincorporated areas of Comanche, Canadian, Cleveland, Logan, and Pottawatomie counties have decided not to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. Federal assistance cannot be provided for the repair or replacement of a home or business in those counties unless they participate in the program. The government requires counties to recognize flood areas and build only low-risk property there, like a golf course or an airport. It's designed to minimize losses and help the feds cut down costs.
Eventually, the government hopes, and we are seeing a trend around the country, that the local communities will begin to move their development out of floodplains and therefore minimize the amount of money the taxpayer has to pay every year for flood losses. That is happening around the country in other communities where they have adopted these ordinances. So it is a mutual aid sort of program. We will help insure the losses for property that's already there if the communities will help themselves by moving structures out of the floodplain.
Human Services are not affected by the failure to participate in the program, and officials urge residents to go ahead and sign up for flood insurance in case county officials decide to participate later. Kevin Ogle, Action 4.
Get to know each other a little bit better and visit. So I'll meet you down there. Is the gates open? Yeah.
It is done. Bless you. Why don't you read it?
Read it.
Yeah. Why don't you read it?
You got your reading glasses?
More students with fewer dollars. Now that's 83, 84. Then if you take 84 in its cost, we've all suffered through the flood of the fall of 83 and trying to...
The crisis, as you see it.
Well, LD, what we position or in terms of a specific course to reduce it during 82, 83 by 4. Jim, in response to your questions, because we have the responsibility of ensuring that our institutions provide quality education at a cost-effective level. We, the presidents of the 10 state regional and senior universities of the state of Oklahoma, respectfully request that the governor and the state legislature establish a program to bring fiscal stability to state government and, if necessary, give serious consideration to adopting new revenue enhancement efforts.
Over the past 10 days, the Lincoln Mercury division of the Ford Motor Company is reporting a 43% increase in sales compared to a year ago. It may be that people want a luxury car, but one thing is obvious with the new model that goes on sale tomorrow. It is smaller, more compact, and at more than $24,000, Lincoln Mercury executives see it competing directly with European luxury cars.
What we're proving with our air suspension system in this car is you don't have to have a big car to have the marvelous ride that people associate with our products.
It is no secret the last 4 years have been tough on the American auto industry. Ford invested $3 billion into its products this time, including research. They say their research shows people still want luxury and that Japan can't compete in that direction. Bella Shaw, Action 4 in northwest Oklahoma City.
Allowed in a room and board home. So I think, and I don't know about my other colleagues, but I do think that
I feel the health department is interested strictly in the building, the water, the lighting, things of this nature, rather than the client. And I feel that either DHS or mental health, someone that is truly interested in the client, ought to be in charge of licensing these room and board homes.
After the videotape of Henry Lee Lucas was played for the jury yesterday, the prosecution had little to do this morning besides tie up loose ends. In that videotape, Henry Lee Lucas admitted that he killed Becky Powell and then had sex with her body. It was a strong presentation, but this morning the defense began its case with an even more dramatic move. Henry Lucas took the stand to explain for himself what happened that night of August 24th, 1982, when Becky Powell was killed. He was asked how he felt about her. Lucas answered, "I was in love with Becky." He was asked if anyone had ever meant more to him than Becky had. Lucas, in tears now, replied, "No, sir." Henry then went on to describe how they were in a field, how they had argued, how Becky had waved her arms and hit him on the side of the head. Then Henry said the next thing he knew, the knife was in Becky's chest. Like a flash of light, it was over just that fast. And despite his earlier videotape confession, Lucas now denies that he had sex with Becky. He says he's not sure why he told the police that. He added that the police wouldn't believe the truth. Lucas's testimony was conflicting and yet dramatic. He told the court that he wasn't trying to cover up the fact that he killed Becky Powell, and he added, almost wistfully, that there were things that have just happened in my life that I just can't explain. During closing arguments, Lucas was sobbing softly. District Attorney Cobb pointed to discrepancies in Henry's confessions. Defense lawyer Tom Whitlock says it was all a sudden, tragic accident. And late this afternoon, the jury returned its verdict.
We, the jury, found the defendant Henry Lee Lucas guilty of the offense of murder as alleged in the indictment.
Ed Martell for NBC News, Denton, Texas.
Federal Judge Luther Bohannon asked the FBI to investigate what happened at Conner Prison the night of August 29th. Several hundred inmates ran wild through the prison until inmate Greg Hodges was gunned down. Judge Bohannon wanted the FBI to determine if Hodges' civil rights had been violated. The report says corrections officers were initially ordered to fire warning shots over inmates' heads. However, as the riot continued, guards were commanded to lower their fire. At the apparent time the inmate was shot, officers had to contend with limited visibility, darkened buildings, thick smoke, glass breaking, inmates yelling, and a TV helicopter hovering overhead. The report concluded that prison guards apparently followed Corrections Department policy, and there was no indication of any wrongdoing by Conner personnel. In addition, the FBI concluded the riot was neither premeditated nor racially inspired. The State Corrections Department is conducting its own investigation of the Conner prison riot. The state's report should be released to the public within the next few weeks. Scott Wallace, Action 4.
In the area of mutual defense, American taxpayers are contributing more than $700 each year to our defense effort. In Japan, the Japanese citizens are only contributing less than $100 each year for the defense effort. That's not fair. The Japanese ought to bear more of the burden.
There's no question a marching band can make one's heart beat a little faster. A rousing march stirs deep feelings and reminds us what Veterans Day is all about.
Because everybody fought it in the world, you have to remember them. Some of them died in the war.
Some Oklahomans take pride in America's current military posture. Veterans Day gives them an opportunity to remember our servicemen and women in places like Grenada and Lebanon.
Because the men that were in the war, they came back from the war so they could see their country.
Others recall wars that ended long ago. On Veterans Day, they remember places like Normandy, Versailles, and Gettysburg.
For the Civil War, we wouldn't be here if they didn't have it because our grandma and grandpa might have been in the war and they came back today.
The first graders of Midwest City's Eastside Elementary will remember today's bands and flags and pretty girls. As they grow older, they'll recall the reasons for celebrating Veterans Day. Scott Wallace, Action 4 in Midwest City.
I believe this will be very good for the state of Oklahoma. In fact, it's just around $1 billion, conservatively. It is one of the most successful things in this country today, with 18 states and the District of Columbia. In fact, some of the revenues from the lottery has actually kept the state going when they had such shortfalls. For instance, Michigan. A few years ago, they cleared over $315 million.
You know, there are lots of folks that think deaf people are folks that can't talk. Well, that's a myth we're going to dispel.
Push. Push. Okay, you know what you're not doing? You're not giving a good mouth ramp. Push. Push. That's better. Push. Push. Okay, that's much better.
Alexander Ashe has been almost totally deaf since birth. Now, even though he can't hear like you and me, he's learning to speak like a person with normal hearing. The hearing aids of today play a big role in helping deaf children learn to speak. These instruments are so sophisticated that they have the capacity to tap into what little hearing a person like Alexander might have remaining. This new generation of hearing aids has helped revolutionize the teaching of deaf children. Teachers used to emphasize looking at their lips, not listening to their voice.
Because when I first started teaching, everything was watch, watch, watch. And now it's switched to listen. And the voices are more natural. What the children can do with their speech is much more natural.
Alexander is one of those extra bright kids who is now attending a regular junior high school with kids his own age. He loves sports, television, he even loves music. The potential for a kid like Alexander is really unlimited.
I like to be a doctor, helping people.
I'm Dr. Red Duke. You know, by the age of 3 months, any child ought to react to having paper wadded up behind his ear or any other loud noise. You know, he may just blink or throw up his hands, but he should have some kind of a reaction. Now, if he doesn't react to that kind of noise, then he may have a hearing problem, and you should ask your doctor to have him examined. He's got much more sophisticated tests to determine the quality of his hearing.
Here comes a giant. The giant is awake. Stomp, 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 stomp. Quake, quake, quake. Oh.
In spite of their problems, these kids are lucky because their parents discovered their hearing problems at a very early age. Even profoundly deaf children can actually hear sound if they're fitted with the right hearing aid. And the earlier, the better.
You and I have to listen for a couple of years before we start to talk. And we have thousands and thousands of hours of listening time before ever we utter a single word. And a hearing impaired child is in the same boat.
Not all of these children are actually deaf. About half of them hear normally. They are in this preschool environment with deaf children serving as role models for how normal hearing children should act at their age. About 1/3 of the hearing impaired children will be able to keep up with these normal hearing kids well enough to attend regular school. That is, once the School for Deaf Children decides they're ready for it. Let me emphasize that the chances of a hearing impaired child getting into the mainstream of life are much better if the hearing problem is addressed early. Very simply, you have to be able to listen before you can learn to talk. I'm Dr. Red Duke. You know, in the past, the road back from a stroke has been long and challenging. But some of my colleagues are involved in an experiment that may very well change this whole process, particularly if treatment is sought early.
Can you hold your hands out? Good. Now, were you able to lift that right arm up when you came here in the hospital?
No, I was completely paralyzed the whole right side.
Do this with your hands.
Samuel Mills was paralyzed and speechless just 10 days ago from a sudden stroke. He was rushed to Herman Hospital, where a group of doctors, headed by Dr. Frank Yatsu, began administering a new experimental drug for stroke patients.
I started getting the IV and they started putting the medicine in me. Well, it wasn't but just a little while until I could talk coherently real good. You know, it was just a miracle, you know, the way it happened.
Samuel is one of 10 patients who have agreed so far to this treatment experiment. So far, about 1/2 have improved dramatically.
It's important to remember that we are trying a number of different types of treatment. Samuel got one of them, and we're not even sure which one he got. And in order to maintain objectivity in any trial of medication, you have to give some patients a medication and some patients no medication, and then compare the two groups. And that's what we're doing here.
It's also important to remember that this treatment must be given within the first 24 hours after the stroke occurred. You know, in the past, the prospects for a person that experienced a stroke was really rather gloomy. But this work we're talking about now offers a real glimmer of hope for that person that is unfortunate enough to go through this experience. There's a lot of things going on. I'm Dr. Red Duke.
NFL football games. Please welcome Roger Staubach.
We belong to the land, and the land we belong to is grand. And when we say, oh, we're only saying you're doing fine, Oklahoma, Oklahoma, O-K-L-A-H-O-M-A, Oklahoma. Yow! Thank you.
When the second shift resumed operations at the Oklahoma City plant, more than 500 of the 2,000 employees that came back to the assembly line were from other GM facilities. The new workers came from a list of volunteers at the closed Southgate plant in Los Angeles and the Fremont operation in San Francisco. But now these imports say they should not have started at the bottom of the seniority totem pole when they transferred to Oklahoma City. They want union leaders to know they are not satisfied with the present policy.
If you're laid off, by no reason of my own fault, but it's GM's fault because they shut a plant down, why shouldn't I carry my in-plant seniority?
But longtime Oklahoma UAW members don't see it that way. They claim they were here first and should not be bumped down.
I agree with the transferring from plant to plant, but I don't think they should get their seniority back, or, you know, not inside the plant.
Why?
Well, it would push everybody back down on the seniority. It would mess everything up through the whole national agreement.
Even if the local membership passes this resolution, there is no guarantee that transferred workers will regain plant seniority. A yes vote will mean only that a formal recommendation will be submitted to the national UAW office. But local UAW officials admit this issue will not be a major bargaining point in their 1984 contract. At General Motors, Kurt Autry, Action 4.